All right. Hello, everybody. My name's Anthony Spiteri. I'm the regional CTO for APJ at Veeam Software. I'm also the lead cloud and service provider technologist. But more importantly, as I'm talking to you in this presentation, I'm just a geek who has ideas, who thinks they're a developer, wasn't very good at it, and ended up taking a different career path. But what this is all about is how modern technology, the modern platforms that we have today, i.e., generative AI platforms, large language models, can help you bring your even craziest ideas to life. So this is from puddings to platforms, bringing ideas to life with ChatGPT. Um, Really, what I want to talk about a little bit is my journey first. So, as you can see there, I've got a few websites listed. There's actually a couple more, but these are the main ones for today. My main blog, anthonyspiteri.net. You can find me at Twitter at Anthony Spiteri. I do run a podcast as well at gtwgt.com, at GTWGT podcast. And what we're going to talk about today with regards to how, this crazy idea around black pudding, what is black pudding, my crazy idea for an app that I had, and why I'm talking to you today on the 90 Days of DevOps YouTube series for 2024 is findmyblackpudding.com and also Find My X platform. So what's this all about? So these are a few of the main points that I want to talk about over the next 15 to 20 minutes. It's going to be the only slide that I show. And then I'm going to get into some visuals around interfaces and whatnot as to the journey and what I've actually created out of this brilliant idea that I had in the depths of COVID. So I think just to level set, what is black pudding first, just in case you're wondering. If you're English, you know what black pudding is. If you're Scottish, you know what black pudding is. If you're Irish, you know what black pudding is. If you live in continental Europe, you've got different variations of it. It's basically blood sausage made with blood. I'm going to show you a quick video just to get a quick glimpse as to what it actually is. So give me a second, let me load this up. Okay, so don't freak out too much, but effectively what black pudding is, it's blood. Okay, so you do need blood. You do need that as the base ingredient. So if you're a vegetarian, look away now. But effectively what we get once we actually mix this together and put it into its ingredients with oats, a bit of suet, a bit of fat, is we get a beautiful pudding that looks a bit like this. And then what you do with this pudding at the end of it is you can have it for predominantly breakfast, but I like to have it for all sorts of times of the day. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, doesn't really matter. I love the stuff. Interestingly enough, my background with this, and why I'm talking to you about black pudding, which is actually quite strange in itself, and then how this turned into an app idea was it all started on a trip to England in 1990. My uncle took me to a pub on the outskirts of Liverpool, and I tasted this stuff on the plate. It was salty, it was tasty, and it was black pudding. And I basically fell in love with it. Just to give you an idea as to what it might look like at the end it's being packed in there into its casing. It doesn't look that great, does it? But believe me, it's tasty. And once you understand, much like haggis, what it can do, what it tastes, and how it fits into a breakfast, ergo looking a bit like this as a full English breakfast, you'll get to see exactly what it can do. The taste of it is fantastic. You love it, you hate it. Now, in terms of the idea, in terms of this great idea that I had around an app. So in a nutshell, I sat there one day during COVID, as we all did, and thought about different things in life. One of the things that I thought about was a craving for black pudding and understanding that in places that aren't in the UK, it's actually hard to get it. So I thought of an app. Wouldn't it be awesome if there was an app where you could go on your phone, plug in your location, and find the nearest location that offered black pudding, either at breakfast or able to buy it? Okay. That was the genesis of this thought. So like every good project, as Michael K would say, you register a domain. So I registered the domain findmyblackpudding.com, and there it sat on ice for a number of years, probably 2 to 3 years. So with that, we forward to 2022, the end of 2022, when OpenAI released ChatGPT. Phenomenal platform, game-changing in terms of bringing generative AI to the masses. We all know a year and a half later now what it's actually done to our industry. I guess like many of you, the first thing that I actually did when I got on that platform was I basically asked it to write a script for me. Being in infrastructure, knowing some scripting, I really was interested to see if it could produce something that was pretty accurate and would actually work. Much to my surprise, and I'm guessing much to everyone's surprise, when we're able to say in a very natural way, create a script to do X, Y, it did it, it produced it, we plugged it into the system and it worked. Okay, cool. This is an interesting platform. Fast forward a few months, and I guess what I thought about at that point is how can I make some of my ideas a reality, knowing that I've got this awesome resource in play. And that was really the birthplace of my initial drive to try and find my black pudding from an idea in my head to an app reality. So what I was able to do was I was able to go into ChatGPT and effectively I just fed it the idea that I had in my head verbatim. Here's the app. Here's what I want it to do. Here's what I think we should base it on. This is how I think we should approach it. This is what I want in terms of front end and back end. I want to base it on certain technologies. Can you help me? So going to the Find My Black Pudding in ChatGPT, so what I asked it was, can you give me an architectural overview of the whole application, front end and back end? And what you can see here is that it has given me a lot of information because it knows exactly what has been working with me on this time. And again, as many of you who have dabbled in LLMs and ChatGPT or whatever else is out there to help you produce code and to develop, use it as your developer, you know there's a ton of frustrations with it. And there's constant reinforcements and constant relearnings that you have to do to be able to get what you want, extract exactly what you need from the large language model to transfer what's in your head into a bit of code to a working application. So you can see here we've got the front-end architecture utilizing HTML, CSS, JavaScript, a few templates. It's leveraging a few design and UI templates as well. We're implementing SEO. We're doing interactive elements. We've got reactive design in play. So the back end, we're using Flask with Python. Again, this is just something that I have base knowledge in, but making something complex like this sort of application was never going to be something that I was able to achieve without the large language model. If we have a look here, we've got APIs, we've got security. We obviously need to think about hosting deployment. We need to know about staging and testing. And then obviously additional componentry, which is content management, analytics and SEO, Nginx as well, when we actually have to host this on the internet. But end to end, this is a real application. This is something that, again, from an idea in my head, working with ChatGPT as my developer, has been able to become a fully fledged working application that's actually live and in play today. We're going to get to it a little bit later on. What I thought I would do though is I might actually just quickly start off and use a raw ChatGPT interface. It must be said this is ChatGPT Plus, so I am able to use the 4 model. 3.5 will work. Obviously, you've got some limitations on there. You still have limitations on 4, but it does work pretty well. Frustratingly, they have tightened some areas. So in terms of coercing and trying to manipulate what you want it to do has become challenging in a way. But this is the skill of platform engineering. I'm going to finish off with what platform engineering is a little bit later on. So firstly, if I was to basically say, hey, I have an idea for an app. It's a location-based search app. What would I need to get this going? Thinking about using Google spell that right, Google APIs for the mapping. I want a front end and a back end, and I need this to be hosted in AWS Light Sail. Just really basic, right? Like this is obviously not really talking about the app specifically, what it's going to be about, but it's really interesting to see what ChatGPT comes back here. At first, it'll tell you it's a really cool idea, right? Yep, here's what it needs. So you need a front end. So it's giving us some options here around React. Yep, I use React. It's talking about some other frameworks. It's talking about the back end here. It's giving us some Node.js. So it's giving us some options to be able to say what we're going to use with it. So at the end of this, I would go, okay, I'm comfortable with Python. I'm comfortable with Flask. I'm comfortable with HTML. So let's work on that and use that as the foundational building blocks for this application. This is how I got started. And then over here, it's talking about hosting with Lightsail, and it'll effectively give you a bit of an overview as to what you need to think about to actually create the app before we start and then get into it. So this is really interesting because it's giving you development steps, tools and services, everything that you need. I think the big point here is that I'm not a developer. I'm not even a DevOps guy, right? I can program a little bit. I've always been able to do that. That's been part of my working environment and life all my career, but I can't start from scratch. So what interfacing with a large language model that's able to be my developer has enabled me, again, like I said at the start, is to take what's in my head, convert it into a prompt, and then get back some actual items that I can actually work with and then create an application out of, okay? So from this point forward, I would go, okay, so it's really interesting to understand how you work with the model, treat it like a human, treat it like a person, treat it like a developer. I think that's how we get the best out of these natural language interfaces, right? If you treat it like a computer, you're going to get computer-like answers back. So I feel like it's always good to give it a little bit of a natural conversational flow. Okay, so help me set up a dev environment. Whoops. That is a Python-based app using Flask. And let's go with JavaScript and HTML and CSS. So, okay, I'm being very basic here to show you guys what you can actually do here. But what it should do here is it should give you the instructions and what you need to do to actually get going. Okay, so install Python, set up a virtual environment. Okay, it's going to give you the commands that you can actually use. And I did all this, right? It's going to give you, if you're on a Mac, if you're on Windows, do this, this, or that. Install Flask, use pip to install the dependencies that you need. It gives you a very, very basic example of how to create a Flask app to start with, and then how to run that app. And then it shows you where it'll be running. So this is the basics that you would do, even if you're new to programming, right? And just think about, again, having an idea, but not really having the skill set to be able to program. This is awesome for that. This is how I got started, okay? It obviously helps with some foundational understanding about what hosting is, what coding is, how they work from a front end and back end, having security. That all helps for sure. But I think the point here is that now that we've got this here, we've got the ability to take our ideas and make them a reality and actually take them to the next level as well. Because there's no way that I would have been able to get what you're going to see in terms of the final outcome without having a developer that was ChatGPT help me along the way. All right, and here we go. It's even actually talking to me about version control and everything that we need, right? So that's pretty cool. That's an example of how you'd get started, okay? And then as you build, as you create, what you do is you're going to say, okay, give me basic HTML page to start with and tell me how to structure that in the dev environment. Okay, so let's have a look and see. Okay, let's create a basic HTML page, use it as a starting point. So it'll talk to you about templates now that are part of a Flask application. You know, you're getting into routes, you're getting into all sorts of the ways that you would construct an application using Python, using Flask, and it'll help you actually put that through. It's going to give you the structure there that you need. Fantastic, right? So again, everything that you need to start your journey on creating that application, ChatGPT is going to help you here and get started. Okay, there's a CSS file. Actually, a note on CSS. The one thing that I found in terms of strengths and weaknesses with ChatGPT is that what it's strong on is that foundational setup, getting the templates in place, even maths, doing hard complex maths. And I'll show you briefly when I show you the structure of what I've done for Find My Black Pudding. There's some complex mathematics that goes into working out the mapping, how to work out the distance, how to get the user location, and then exactly work out how far you are from a location to tell you where you are in terms of distance relative to that location. But that was ChatGPT, 9 times out of 10, nailed that. Didn't have to go back and reiterate and correct itself too much. Where it did struggle actually was in the design, the UI design. It's actually pretty bad in that, especially when it comes to CSS. I found that it was horrible at CSS, and actually that's where I spent most of my time struggling with it to actually get the beautiful design of the site, what I think is a nice design of the site working. Do it reactive, have it basically work on a mobile, have it working on a desktop. That's actually the challenging part here. And then security in the back end and whatnot. But in terms of the complex stuff, it's actually pretty good. So there you go. So I've shown you a little bit about how we can get started, and you know we're well on our way now. And then you start with a base application, you test it out, you run it, you're building it, and basically rinse and repeat until you get what you want. You can do anything with this, right? Think about all the possibilities that are open now and unlocking those ideas in your head. Okay, So what I want to do now is I'll show you a little bit of the dev environment, and then we'll get into the actual nuts and bolts of the application. So they're using Visual Studio. You can see that I've got things set up here. I've got the structure. I've got the main Flask application running. We're doing things. And I think what's actually important here is that a lot of us obviously don't start off with security in mind. But if you look here, I'm using server variables. And this is stuff that I actually learned along the way, because I asked ChatGPT along the way to say, hey, I know that we're doing this at a basic level, but if I'm going to put this into production, I've got to think about security. I've got to think about masking keys and all that kind of stuff. So you don't want to put your special keys out there for people to tap into, right? Done that before, got burnt. So it's really interesting that you can actually learn security and how to harden an application even. So if this was to go public, if your idea is strong enough to actually, become a reality, you should be able to leverage ChatGPT and other LLMs to build this up and be secure at the same time. So just a little side note there. Obviously, the code here is quite complex. You can see here that we're using a bunch of local bindings. This is for the test environment. I've got the front end and the back end working. Again, probably developers are going to look at this and you're going to go, this is absolute crap in terms of the structure of it, the way that it's doing it. But for me and my understanding, this is what worked for me. And then, we've got some other templates here that we leverage. So we've got locations at HTML. And then ultimately what we have here is the map. If I can get to the map. The map is the main website here, right? So you can see that this is just a bunch of HTML. This is the front page that comes in. It calls the JavaScript. The JavaScript has all of the smarts behind it. And that's actually what we'll get into now. So if I click into the static and get the JavaScript, now you start to see, and first thing that you'll notice, 1,194 lines of code. So I've estimated that in total, I've probably written, with ChatGPT's help, about 10,000 plus lines of code for this application. That's interesting in itself because, to a certain extent, ChatGPT struggles with, even with its text interpreter, even though you can feed it these files, it struggles with growth and scale. So one of the challenges that I would say is that when you get to this sort of level of coding in terms of the lines, you're going to have to learn to be pretty good to be able to enter in chunks of the code and re-enter it into the code to make it work. So this is all trial and error, right? You trial it, an error pops up, you feed it back in the ChatGPT, it comes back with a fix, you put it in the code, you rerun it, and there you go. This is how it works. So you can see here that it looks like a real program, right? It looks like I'm actually a developer, hiding. You can see some of the mats that's come up. I talked about the mats, right? And how this sort of complexity was actually done almost first go by ChatGPT, by me basically saying that I need to calculate the distance from the location that we get via the browser versus where I am versus the location of the actual site. Again, I'll show you this a bit later on. And actually, one other thing to note is that what ChatGPT does really well, and what I know a lot of you real programmers and developers don't do very well, is actually comment and actually, say what the code is actually doing. So I think coming in here, we can actually see what the code is doing. Being able to read code is important, and being able to understand what certain functions and parts of the code actually do is critically important in itself. In terms of the backend, let's go to the backend here. Here. Okay, you can see the backend has a little bit more complexity to it. We've got an application main Flask app. Again, lots of modules. You'll see that I'm doing Firebase for authentication. I'm using SQL Alchemy to do database. I've got the models that are basically working on my database models. I've got Stripe integration. This is a complex application, right? This isn't something that I feel, I would have been able to do even if I tried. And to the flip side of that, if I actually got someone to do this would have cost a lot of money to do. Okay, so I think that's the awesome part of ChatGPT, leveraging it as your developer. It's just enabled myself and then in turn, others, the ability to be able to do stuff that wasn't possible. The efficiencies in this are crazy. So here's a lot of the database stuff. These database and the modules and the definitions effectively equate to an API. I'm not going to go through this in any great detail. Suffice to say, there's another 887 lines of code. It is a really, really cool application, and understanding how to, work with this back and forth with ChatGPT is part of the art. I've got this linked up to GitHub. My GitHub page is here. So you can actually see that since July, the amount of commits that I did initially were huge, because I was working with ChatGPT to make changes, thinking of ideas. I'd hit one milestone, I'd be able to develop one particular module. It wouldn't work as expected, or I was trying to troubleshoot it. But then at the same time, let's try and enhance it. So all that period there during winter, obviously, which was a bit of a downtime for us here in Australia, was able to really work outside of hours and on weekends to be able to get this little side project off the ground. And then it kind of stopped for various reasons. And then, a bit more of a push there in December. But obviously, once the app was up and running, I was able to focus on actually, getting the secondary part of this was to, get people interested in it and actually using it. In terms of the app, let's take a look at it. Let's see what that code actually looks like. So let's go here. So yeah, this is the application. So again, a little welcome here. You can see the CSS isn't perfect. I really don't like the fact that I've got that scroll bar there, but this is the thing. So here's the concept of the app. Literally, you go on findmyblackpudding.com. It basically says why we're here, and basically let's get started taking you to your next location. So if I embark on my quest, I've got these buttons here at the top, these controls. I've got a drop-down list, which basically has the closest locations that have black pudding on offering. Now, again, think about this. Could be black pudding, could be anything. Effectively, we're using Google APIs to basically leverage our location via the browser. So there you go, we've got my pinpointed location there. We can then drop down and actually select a location. And then when we click on that, it's going to bring up a little window to say what it actually is. Okay, the pipe is in Currumbine, here are the hours. And then from a directional point of view, if you're on your mobile, you can click on that and it will give you the direction to get to that place from your current location. So it's kind of cool, pretty funky, very niche, as people have told me. But if you can just disconnect what the Find My Black Pudding part is and think about the reality of what we've been able to create with just interacting and prompt engineering with my base knowledge of programming, of platforms, of systems, and then being able to manipulate that within ChatGPT, it's pretty cool, right? Okay, let's take that off. So this is the first page. What's interesting when you're developing an app like this, which is location-based, part of what I really wanted to focus on was making it look pretty on the mobile, because it's where most of the people are going to be searching for their hit of black pudding. So if I go to the mobile site, you can see I'm leveraging Safari to actually show this in a responsive design. So you can see the differences here between what I've got there and what I have here in the main desktop app. So it will detect using the CSS, again, lots and lots of pain, lots of suffering, talking back and forth with ChatGPT, getting angry to basically come up with something like this. So you can see here I've got those buttons that are hidden. It's still looking at the location. We can add a location in here. So this is pretty cool, being able to come in here. So I'm leveraging Google Places to be able to come in here, and this is going to auto-complete a location as well. You can come in here, you can select what type it is, and it's going to add it to the database, that Postgres backend that we've got going. We can submit the location. You can see I'm also leveraging security. I talked about security, being able to think about how you protect the data, how you protect the integrity of the database, because you don't want people just inserting tons of records without some sort of verification. So I'm leveraging Cloudflare for that, which has got a really nice capture that I've integrated into that. So submit location would put it in there. The feedback mechanism, because everyone needs a bit of feedback. There's a verified location. You can click near me, so it gets the next 10. If we go to countries, you can see here, this is actually leveraging my dev environment. So you can see here that I've only got a couple of locations, but this will show us what's in Australia. Go back here. You can go back and see what's in Malta. And then in the United Kingdom, it'll show you what's there as well. So there's lots of cool functionality that we've built in. Again, this is hours and hours of just trying to manipulate, coerce, and work with ChatGPT to build this all up. If we go back to the main application, you'll see that we've got a ton more. We've got about 1,300 locations in at the moment, mostly in the UK. So if I go to the UK and I scroll out, you'll see that the UK is basically one giant black pudding. All right. So I talked about how this is the front end for it. Now, in terms of what I did at the back end, I really needed something to be able to manage locations, because the idea here was that locations would come in and be able to manage their back end. So what I actually have is a full custom-based back end to manage a location. So you can see the type and all that kind of stuff. So if I go back and show you what that is, it's really interesting to show you how that tied in. And then I'll show you some of the frameworks that I use to be able to get that all working, the Stripe integration, the Firebase authentication, and then putting it to light sail. So let's go back here. And let's go to let's first go to the location. This is the admin page. I needed a way, if you remember someone submitting a location, I needed a way to basically have that approvable or deletable, basically, because you don't want someone just feeding in thousands and thousands of locations and then having them, pollute the good data on the website. So what I built was a full backend. So let's log into the backend here. This is still using the Google capture. Very annoying. And let's log in. So what we've got here is a very, very basic location editor. So it's got the ability to check for new locations. So you can see here that I can check for a new location. I can approve or deny the request. If I approve the request, the logic at the back end effectively puts it to a live site. If I deny it, it deletes the record completely. Okay, that's denied. There's a claim scenario. I'm not going to go into that in any great detail. And then effectively as well, what I needed to do was effectively go and edit the locations as well, right? So I could do some back-end manipulation. It's basically just a table editor effectively. Let's take a look and see. Actually, funny story as well. As you go along and you realize you need to scale, having a search bar here was actually pretty critical, because just a drop down, if you've got 1,300, 10,000 locations, just having a drop down wasn't going to work. So I actually worked to get a framework which will give me the search. So if I type in an A, it's going to give me a list of all the locations that are in there with starting with A. I load that up. I can change and manipulate any table entry here, and then effectively do that. I can save it. I can delete it. I can add a new one. It's a fully functional backend here. So that's pretty cool in itself. Let's log out of this. By the way, this is using that Firebase authentication I talked about as well. As a customer who's claimed a location or who's got some sort of location management, this is what it looks like. So again, I'm not a robot. I should change this to Cloudflare at some point because it's a lot better system. Let's log in. Okay, so this is the location dashboard. So effectively the idea is that, the front end is for people to crowdsource locations, add locations, and then people to find their best black pudding locations that they can see. At the back end, you've got the ability to claim a location. So you can see here that there's a claimed location here. I can go in here and edit that location as a user. And I can effectively do the same sort of stuff that I showed you, not as an admin, but as a one-to-one owner of a location. Okay, so there's also the ability to search for a location. So the effective idea, without going too much into the detail of it, is that once location is entered and approved in the front end, it's then searchable to be claimed by a company or a location or a business or whatever it is. So again, if we search here and we search for trotters, we've got the ability to claim this location. And it's going to go to the back end and it's going to be then waiting, pending to be claimed. Okay, so then you saw the admin page. I would then go in and approve this claim, and then it would be fully manageable at the back end. A pretty cool little system, right? And then from here, I've actually done Stripe integration. So, but the ability here to purchase verification, which gets you this, this, and that. And this down here is the plugin into Stripe. So this was actually quite a complex part of the development, but plugging into Stripe. So again, I can go in here, you can put in some fake information, and you can buy an actual subscription. So there's some pretty cool stuff working here and stuff that I would never imagine myself being able to do. But again, the ability to do this and get the idea in my head, which is what I wanted, talk to ChatGPT being able to manipulate what I wanted and then for it to feed back the code and then troubleshoot that is the essence of what we're doing here. You can change a password that goes off to Firebase. So everything that you'd expect from a real application, I've kind of got it in here, which again, not a developer. It's just platform engineering at its best. So let me log out here. If we go to what the backend looks like, Firebase authentication. So once that's all done, we're plugged into here, we're creating user accounts. It creates a Firebase user. It then creates a user in Stripe to be able to do subscription management and all that. So it's really functional, something that I'd never thought I'd be able to do, but through the magic of prompt engineering and ChatGPT, I was able to. In terms of where it's hosted on Lightsail, pretty traditionally on a VM with a database that is Postgres, fronted by Nginx. So that's the application that sits live on the internet as I do my dev locally. I then obviously use GitHub. It's really a poor man's CI/CD, being able to push and pull from dev into the main environment, which lives here. So this is the actual web server here. If I've actually built a little script here, which is the pull restart script, which actually goes and looks for any changes in the repo and will actually, commit any changes to production and restart all the services and whatnot. So there you go. Kind of like an end-to-end, very quick look at the application, which has all been done in my mind with ChatGPT, platform engineering at its best. Right. So just to finish off, I probably haven't shown you all that I wanted to show. It's very hard in the time that we've had, but I think you kind of get the idea. This was a journey, right? The journey from an idea in my head, understanding that we've got this great technology out there, large language models, chatbots, being able to leverage generative AI to be able to do stuff that we could never imagine we could have done. I am now a DevOps, effectively. I'm pleased to say that, though, obviously I say that very tongue-in-cheek. I'm only as good as the prompting that I'm able to do into the platforms to spit out the code, manipulate that, troubleshoot, feed it back into the application, run it, test it. If it works, it works. But this is the essence of ChatGPT. There's a little bit of magic, but we're unleashing AI's potential here. A lot of people have some great ideas. We're all entrepreneurs at heart, I believe, and being able to have an idea for an app and make that reality is something that generative AI is able to profoundly enable in 2024 and beyond. So thanks for listening. Again, check out all of these sites that we're going to show you here. Go to my website, check out my blog and my podcast, and please, if you love black pudding, go to findmyblackpudding.com and go from there.